Well, the goal for today's webinar is really to show you guys how to get started and get value quickly. Consider this like Userpilot basics. So we're going to go over everything that you need to know to start building experiences and really get your hands on the product. Later down the road, we will be hosting a more complex webinar that'll go over some more advanced features. But today we're really hoping to get you guys all the tools that you need to really start getting value out of Userpilot. So in order to do this, we're going to go into two parts. The first portion is I'm actually going to introduce some ideas about onboarding as a concept, talk about minimal viable onboarding and how that actually plays into what you're hoping to build. And I'm going to explain why this might be useful to people. And then, of course, a couple do's and don'ts. But in the second portion of the webinar, we're actually going to start building. I have a mock website that we will build a minimal viable onboarding right there. So that's our plan for today. Let's jump right in. The first thing that I want to talk about is onboarding. And onboarding really is an ongoing process. A common mistake that users often make is they try to teach everything all at once right at the beginning. And the problem is that that's a really easy way to bombard users. If you consider that onboarding is a journey that your users will take part in as they work on your products and as they use them, it'll be a lot easier for you to break your user onboarding into a lot more manageable segments. Another thing to keep in mind is that your onboarding is not a replacement for good UI/UX. It's really important to have a good foundation already set up so that a product experience layer built using Userpilot can show the right action to the right user at the right stage in order to help activate them. So if you consider Tinder, the interface is super simple, really easy to use. However, a first-time user isn't going to really know how to properly use it, and they're not going to get the most out of it. So even something as simple as Tinder does need a little bit of an explanation in order to help them understand what it is that they're working with and how to get the most out of it. The third thing that I want everyone to keep in mind when we're thinking about onboarding is that simplicity really is the key. If you keep things simple, your users are going to be able to they'll be able to understand things a lot more easily. If you give users too much information too quickly, you're a lot more likely to lose them. They won't fully understand everything that they're being taught. And so by giving them things that are simple, clean, and easy to understand, you're making their onboarding experience a lot more pleasurable and a lot easier to use. If you look at the example that I have here, we have simple modals that have steps that the user understands how many they'll have to go through. It's a clean design, super simple, and that's something that we strive for. So, as I mentioned, onboarding really is an ongoing process, right? So they will go through an entire journey using your product from the initial aha moment. They become more advanced users and they start using your key features. Later on, they're really getting into your product and they're using secondary features. And finally, they're going to be champions of your brand using everything that they can possibly get their hands on and be excited to promote it. But when we're talking about minimal viable onboarding, we're really focusing in on the initial portion of this process. This is the first run users that are brand new to your websites and are moving from the aha moment into activation. And so in order to talk about these two things, we really need to know the difference between aha and activation, and be mindful that aha and activation, both things look completely different on every single website, app, platform. It looks different for everyone. So let's take a look. Aha is a super important portion of a user's onboarding process. It's the moment where a user arrives to your pages and recognizes that your product is valuable to them. They know that they need something that you provide to them, right? It's that moment of realization that you can help them. So if you can look at Facebook, for example, the aha moment is when a user says, oh, this is a great tool for me to contact my family and friends, follow news events, share photos, tell stories, comment and like things that my friends and family are doing, right? That aha moment of, I can use this to connect to my friends and family, right? They recognize the value. However, this is not activation. Them registering for this page does not mean that they're activated because they're not getting value yet. So the aha moment in this instance is the user recognizing that Facebook is valuable and they sign up. That's great. But now we need to move them forward in their onboarding journey into activation. And activation is actually when the user starts getting value. The Facebook metric for activation is once a user has 7 friends. And the reason for this is because once a user has 7 friends, they're able to see things populate on their newsfeed. They're seeing their friends share photos, share stories. Now they can like things, they can share things of their own, and they can actually start getting value out of Facebook because without those friends, they just have an empty newsfeed. They're not actually getting value out of it. So those are those 2 separate steps. What does AHA look like? And what does activation look like on your own pages? And in order to really successfully build an onboarding experience layer, knowing what AHA is and what activation is and how separate they are and how you need to present information to your users to move them forward in that progression is super important. So here comes another little poll, a little quiz to make sure I'm explaining things appropriately. So I need to know if you guys now can see the difference between AHA and activation. So what is activation? Take a look at that chat box over on the side and answer my poll when you have a moment. Yeah, we've got some right answers. Fantastic. Excellent. Great. All right, so looks like we know the difference, and keep this in mind as you're thinking about your own onboarding processes, okay? So when we're building a minimal viable onboarding, we're going to try to accomplish 3 key things. The first is to increase that activation rate, right? Make sure that your users are getting value out of your products. We're going to do this by introducing key features, right? In order for a user to be activated, they need to use these key features. And so these 2 things go hand in hand. And the third thing that we're going to do is show contextual tips and hints for their navigation, right? This is where they're going to be learning about your product and understanding the value of your product a little bit more along their way. But these contextual tips and hints are not going to invade their onboarding process, right? It'll be information that's valuable and available to them. However, it's not going to hinder or interrupt their onboarding process. So the first thing that I said we wanted to accomplish with minimal viable onboarding was increasing activation rate. How do we do this? You want to focus your experiences on key actions, right? Making sure that everything is goal-oriented. So if you take a look at this modal that I have here, Userpilot has a couple key metrics for activation, and one of them is installing the Chrome extension. If you guys have been playing around with our Userpilot product, hopefully you have seen this and installed the Chrome extension yourselves. So what we've done here is we have reminded the users of our aha moment, right? We've included some text. Hey, this is why you're here. We're so excited to help you. And then we've presented a super clear and concise task for them to do. Install the Chrome extension. All they have to do is click on this button. It will lead them directly to the location that they need to go to install that Chrome extension. It's clear, it's easy to accomplish, and it's goal-oriented, right? We've taken a step to show them one key action that will help them become activated users. Really easy to do, and it's super important. So that's one of the things that we're going to do with minimal viable onboarding. Another thing that we're going to do with minimal viable onboarding is introducing key features. So that Chrome extension is a key action that users have to take to be activated. Now we want them to start using the process and using the tool. So one of the key, you'll go and introduce key features. What is it that you want your users to do? What do you want them to use? And in this example, on this mock website that I have here, I keep pointing over here because it's where my screen is, but over here, we're introducing a key feature And in this website, in this scenario, they're sending automated emails. And so the key feature is them coming over to these automated emails and taking a look here and trying to send a new message. So what I've done is highlighted the button. I've used a cursor to come and show them where to click. I have included some text to inform my users of what it is and why it's beneficial for them. I blacked out the background to really draw my user's eye directly to it. All of these things really help my users understand what my key feature is, how to use it, and then hopefully that will push them into using it on their own. They came to us because they wanted a problem solved. This is going to help solve their problem, so we teach them how to do it. One of the other things that's important to know when you're setting up experiences is that we do not want to build experiences with a ton of steps. This is a super common mistake, so if any of you guys have been building experiences with a lot of steps, do not fear. I will teach you how to break them into smaller pieces. But an experience with lots of steps basically means that you've set up an experience that is not goal-oriented. To build experiences that are short and concise, 3 to 4 steps, because you're providing them information and you're having them do a task, accomplish something, right? It's a goal-oriented process that will help your users move from aha to activation, because now they're using the tools on your own websites. One of the things that will help you when you're setting up a minimal viable onboarding is audience targeting. Because we are honing in on those first run brand new users, it's really important to set up an experience and these experiences, because they might be a couple, that are really focused on those users, those brand new users. And Userpilot gives you the tools in order to set up experiences that launch specifically for them. Some of the things that we have here are users when they signed up. If they've signed up less than 14 days ago, we know that they're brand new. We also can specify what plan a user is on, if they're on a trial, if they're free, if they're VIPs, whatever you need to focus in on. And you can also specify if they haven't or have done something. So you can launch experiences to really hone in on users that are needing guidance along their way and really set up experiences that help them so that they can be onboarded appropriately. The third thing that I mentioned that we're going to accomplish when setting up experiences is showing contextual tips and hints for users. These are going to be subtle ways to show a user what is available on the page, what it's for, how to use it. However, they're there as information beacons, but are not going to interrupt the actual onboarding process because they are two separate things. Your onboarding experiences, especially for minimal viable onboarding, those first run users have to be goal-oriented and task-based. It's the best way to get your users to use your tools and to become activated. Contextual tips and hints can be used throughout the onboarding process, and they're nice, especially for first run users, so that they can come to them at their own pace. When they're ready to learn about something that's on the page or ask questions and become curious as they're exploring it in their own rhythm, they can come to this and learn about it. But those are not innately goal-oriented. They're information-based, which is great, but they are separate. And so being mindful of what's beneficial information for my users to learn, but what is critical for my users to become activated, and recognizing the difference between those two things and setting up experiences to address both. So now we move into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, talking specifically about our own onboarding processes. I'm going to send out another poll to get a little bit of an idea of what I'm working with here. Do you know if your initial onboarding process is more linear or more branched? Or perhaps you haven't really given it much thought, you're not at that stage yet, or you might not even know the difference because sometimes the differences can be a little bit blurry. Wow, two branched right off the bat. That's great. Okay, 1 linear, 3 branch. All right, so what's great is also there's some opportunities where it might start off as a linear onboarding and then open up to a branched onboarding, or it might start off as branched, but within each individual task that they can accomplish, be a little bit more ABC, linear style. So today we're going to talk about how to set up modals for both, but it is good to keep in mind. So when you're setting up your experiences and you're building, you build knowing what the path forward looks like. Are you giving your users a step A to step B to arrive to step C? Or are you letting your users kind of choose their own adventure and they can try each of these three things, because all of them will lead to activation, but the order in which is super important. So keep that in mind. All right, before we start building, I do want to show just a couple of do's and don'ts for how to use Userpilot and how to onboard your users. The first do is definitely install the JavaScript. Installing the JavaScript will really allow you to get the most out of Userpilot, because once you are passing this script you can start passing us custom events. So you've installed the script on your pages, and now you can start tracking goals, tracking users, tracking features, all of that. And the more that you're able to send to us, the more customizable you're able to make your experiences. You can let us know where users. You can set up experiences that launch separately depending on where they're located. You can set up experiences based on how many times a user has accomplished a goal on your page. Perhaps you need a user to send 3 emails, and once they have sent those 3, you can notify them, congratulating them on accomplishing that, and then teaching them about a secondary feature. Things like that. Sending the JavaScript gives you the most power, and that's why we really encourage users to do so. And in the same token, identifying your users and using identification properties is really going to help you not only provide your users the most customized, fine-tuned experience that are tailored specifically to them, but it also allows you to gather information about what your users are doing on your pages. Are they navigating the way that you had envisioned? Perhaps they're not using a feature that you were expecting them to use, and you will be able to use this by letting us track this information for you. And then using this information, you can better build experiences to help loop them in and teach them the things that maybe they're lacking, or congratulate them on things that they are doing really well. And this really helps users stick with your products, right? If they know that they're using something appropriately, they're feeling a lot more confident using your product, and they'll continue to come back for it. Another definitely do is build experiences per view, as opposed to building experiences that jump from page to page. The reason that this is important is because, as I'm sure we all can agree on, our users are a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes they go through our pages in ways that we wouldn't necessarily expect. And by building experiences per view, you're really making sure that each page your users are getting an onboarding experience that's set up specifically for the page, keeping in mind that there are 2 or 3 steps that are goal-oriented and focused in on what you're trying to accomplish or trying to educate on each view on each page. When you have experiences that bounce around, first of all, there's a lot higher likelihood that that experience isn't going to be accomplished. They're not going to finish it. And oftentimes we're dealing with a lot of users coming in and then having to step away, or a lot of dynamic links. And if you can set up experiences per view, you're really setting up your users for success. They're going to learn what they need to know on each page and then move forward. This also goes into the same vein of avoiding product tours. If you set up experiences that are launched per view, your users are going to really understand what is valuable to them on each page. You're teaching them with a goal in mind. Product tours are it's a very different style of education in which you're showing the user everything that you have, but you're not really teaching your users how to actually use them, right? So if you can set up experiences that educate your users, let them get their hands into the product, they're going to be a lot more confident using it. Whereas if you show them a product tour where you gloss over everything that your page is capable of, at the end of the tour, if they even read most of it, because I don't know about you guys, when I see a product tour, I end up just clicking right through it so I can actually start using the products that I came for. But so if they manage to actually read all of the information that you provided to them, took them all around your entire platform, at the end, they haven't actually learned how to do anything. They've just seen it. So we really want to focus in on the other end where we're teaching users how to accomplish things and become activated. Don't focus on secondary features in a minimal viable onboarding. As I mentioned, user onboarding is that ongoing journey. Your users are going to be experiencing your page and experiencing things throughout their life using your product. And if you focus on secondary features right away, you're really a lot more likely to bombard your users, and they're not going to know how to use those primary features as effectively. And so you really haven't taught them how to be successful on your pages. If we look at Gmail, for example, Gmail, the purpose of it is sending emails, right? That's the most basic feature. And so when a user first comes to your page, comes to Gmail, you're not teaching them how to insert a hyperlink and attach things from Drive and to set up a timer to send an email at a later date. No, you're simply showing them the basics. This is how you add email addresses that you want to send to. This is where your subject line goes, body email, and send. That's it. Teach them the basics. Then after they have successfully been sending emails and are using Gmail appropriately, now you show them the cool things that Gmail can do as extras. And like I said, this could be in the period of a week, 2 weeks, a year. It's really dependent on what your product is and how complex it is. But teaching primary features first and leaving secondary features for later on is super important. 2 screens makes me lose track of where my mouse is. All right, so now it's time to build together. We are going to, I'm going to ask you guys what you want to build first, a linear or a branch flow, but we'll probably find a way to fit both in. We're going to set up an experience that focuses on a key activation event. We're going to segment and target our audience, and I'm going to tell you a couple of the ways that we can focus on secondary features later on. So I'm going to send another poll just to find out what you would like to build first. What would you like to build first, a linear or a branched modal? And while you send that over, I'm going to open up my demo app. Linear modals, awesome. That's great. And then what I can do is switch it around after we've built the linear modal. I'll teach you how to actually make it branched, just in case anybody wants to see how to set up a branched modal as well. So I'm going to change what is being shared right now, and we're going to pop over to an application called, can everybody see my screen? Looks like it, cool. An application called Kickflow. I just want you to imagine it's a demo app that you can just close your eyes and see your own pages right here. Imagine how you will be able to use these tools on your own individual apps. So as I build, I'm building over here. As I build, please feel free to send questions in the chat box as they arise. I won't be answering them in the moment that you send them, more than likely. I will probably try to go for a little while and then take a peek. If I've answered your question already, fantastic. If I haven't, I'll try to go back and cover it. And that way, as questions come up, train of thought, you put them in and we don't forget them. And hopefully we can get as many questions answered as possible. So the first thing that you want to do when building an experience is you're actually going to, you know what I think I'm going to do? Okay, yeah. You're actually going to launch the Chrome extension. I'm going to move this over here so that, there we go. All right. Now I can look at you guys when I build. So the first thing that we want to do is launch the Chrome. The Chrome extension allows you to build directly onto your own pages, and it's super, super helpful. So now, mention it was right here at the bottom waiting for me. There we go. Now we're going to create a new experience. Click create. Now you choose your theme. All of these themes are completely customizable. So you'll want to make sure that it fits in beautifully with your UIUX. You want it to look native so that you can't even tell that somebody else had these templates for you. You built them all yourself. So I've built my own theme, and I'm going to, I'm gonna move you right over here really fast to make sure I can see the questions as they arise. Okay, now I've chosen my theme. I'm ready to add a step. This is important because when we're building experiences, you want to keep in mind where your users are going to be landing. This is a first run user, so you have to navigate to the page that they're actually going to land on as that first appearance on your pages. So for us, in this demo, this is my landing page. So I've navigated here, and this is where I'm going to build my experience. I'm going to add a step. And like I said, we're going to build a modal first. Modals are a really great way to welcome our users and make them feel like they understand what is going to lie ahead in their onboarding experience. If you really quick while we're here, as you hover over any of these UI patterns, it's going to give you a best practice on when to use them. But most of them are quite simple, and it's pretty clear when to use a modal and when to use a hotspot, for example. So we're going to click modal, and all of these are the templates that we have now. And you can also completely edit and modify your own templates so that they fit exactly what you're hoping for. And all of these are super customizable. So we'll take a look. The first row here are all set up to be linear, and then the bottom row is set up to be branched, but you can completely change those and customize those. Let's take a look at this one. Now, take the opportunity to customize this, add your own media, add videos, add GIFs, add absolutely anything that will help your users better understand your product, make it look absolutely beautiful. This is their first impression, so wow them. And in that same token, when you're ready to wow them, you can make this as customized as you'd like by adding a user's name, for example. It's a small detail, but it really helps users feel appreciated. It's nice. So you can say welcome, and then using this little human up here, you can select the property and welcome them by their name. We ask you to have a fallback just in case their name can't be located. So something like, we are glad you are here. And now when they land on the page, they'll see this beautiful image or video or GIF, and then see the welcome message from themselves. Take the opportunity to include some text that reminds the users of that aha moment, why they're here, what they're going to accomplish. And also, perhaps this is a good opportunity for you to let them know what is going to be, what they should expect for their onboarding process. So if they're going to set up their profile, let them know that that's where you're leading them to, and that's what they're going to be accomplishing. So here is that opportunity, but you can also click this little plus button. This plus button, wherever you place it, is going to add an entire row, and then you get to decide what you want in that row. So for example, I'm going to click plus, and I'm actually going to add columns. I'm going to set up one with 2 columns. One, I want to use forms, for example. Perhaps when my users first land on the page, I want to gather a little bit of information on them. So for example, I can use radio buttons, but we have small input, large input, and radio buttons. Small input is a great way to collect perhaps an email or a phone number, a name, anything like that. Large input is something that you can use for when you want a user to maybe develop an idea for you, explain something for you. For example, if you have perhaps collected an NPS survey on a user later on in their experience, and you want to understand why they gave you that score, you can set up an experience like a modal that says, hey, thanks so much for providing us with an 8 on NPS. We'd love to hear more about what you like about our product. And you can give them that large that large input. And this information will then be sent back to you so that you can better understand your users and what they're experiencing on your pages. But in this instance, let's use a radio button. In the label, you can ask what it is that you want to know. So perhaps we want to find out the role of the person coming to your page. And each of these spaces is a new line. So perhaps I need to know if they are in sales, are they in marketing, or are they in development, dev team. All right, so now I'm able to gather this information on my users right off the bat, and this information, their responses to this radio button can be used later on when I'm setting up experiences. So I can launch a whole nother set of experiences depending on if they said they were sales, if they were marketing, or if they were in development. And so I can have experiences that launch for sales, experiences that launch for marketing, and experiences that launch for dev team based solely on their response to this role question, this radio button. And depending on what they've said, perhaps you can ask them, you can include a button here. So now I can say, let's send a message, because that's the first thing that I want my users to accomplish. Now, I actually don't need this anymore because we said we were building a linear first. So now I've got this experience, this modal, that asks a question and takes them into the next step in their onboarding process. I have completely edited everything that I want to on this modal. Now I'm going to take a look at the sidebar here to show you what some of those ways to actually change the modal in and of itself are. So for example, the first thing that I can take a look at is the width of the box. Depending on what media you include, modifying the size of the box might actually change the fit of that image to make it fit a little bit better. So for example, I want this to be a little thinner just because it looks a little bit nicer this way. I'm actually also going to increase the backdrop so that it really stands out. And the last thing that I want to show you all is this X button here. The X button it's up here in the right-hand corner, but I have the opportunity, especially I think importantly, when a user is coming to the very first time they land on my page, I really want them to accomplish the onboarding process that I've set up for them, because it's really going to help make sure that they know how to best use my product. So I'm actually going to go ahead and remove this X button. So now they can click around the entire page. The only way that they'll be able to move forward is by clicking Let's Send a Message, because that's what they're here for. They came to use the automated messages feature on this app, so that's what they're going to accomplish. So I'm going to go ahead and push save, and that modal is all ready to go. Just like that. Now, one quick thing that I want to show you before we actually keep moving is that this button here, you can take a look at what it's linked to. By default, this will go to the next step in the experience, but you do have a lot of options when it comes to how you want this button to function. You can have it go to a URL, you can have it trigger an entire new experience, you can go to a previous step. So perhaps you have two buttons and say like, I don't understand, go back. And that button will go back. You can dismiss experiences, all kinds of great things that you can use. But since I am building off of this modal into the next step, I'm going to have it and leave it to go to next step. That's okay for this modal or for this button. So she's all set, she's ready to go. Now I'm gonna add that next step, which is going to lead my users to this automated messages button. That's where they wanna go. So I'm gonna click add a step. And what I'm gonna use for this process is a driven action. Driven actions are a really great way to get your users to actually accomplish something. Drives action, pretty self-explanatory, but by doing that, this user now is going to know that the next step is coming to click on automated messages. What is important, the reason that I'm doing it this way and not just automatically having automated messages, the URL for that open up automatically, is because this is a process that my users are going to have to do over and over and over again. This is a key feature. So I need to teach my users every step of accomplishing this key feature, or using this key feature and accomplishing this key action. So I want this to be a driven action click. I want my users to come here and click on it. I'll select my template. And here's where you're going to explain to the users what it is that they're going to accomplish when they're here, why it's beneficial for them, iterate value. You can completely choose the placement of this button. So you can get it a little bit closer, a little bit further away, depending on what your own UI looks like. You might want to modify this. Same thing with top and bottom, but it was pretty well centered to that button. Placement element is important depending on your own UI, because you should be able to choose where something is located surrounding that button. So if you're blocking some text that you would rather not block, so for example, if I moved it up here, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because now I'm blocking the dashboard. If I moved it over here, for example, that's all right because it continues the line of sight. But you can play around with this, and it's completely dependent on your own UI. Now scroll down here, and these are all just options for customizing that actual setting in the box. But one of the other things that you should always take a look at is moving over to group settings. In group settings, you'll be able to show cursor on selected element, for example. This means that once they click select next step, or send a message, that modal goes away, this driven action comes, and then they'll see the cursor come over to automated messages. So it shows them, oh, you need to click on this. And you can select your cursor type. You can also turn on that backdrop. This is a super helpful tool to really make sure that your users can see what it is that you want them to use. And the same thing goes for this driven action. I really want them to click on this. This is an important step in their onboarding. So I'm going to remove their ability to click on that X. Now, they can click on anywhere on the page, but it's not going to do anything until they click on automated messages. And it's just a way to make sure that my users are following the steps that they need to follow in order to be onboarded. So now this is done. As I mentioned before, every single one of these templates is fully customizable. If for some reason here you wanted to include a GIF or a video or some form of information, another button, you can just click that plus button, it'll add another row. And like I said, completely customize it however you need to. So we're gonna go ahead and save it. Now, I have a modal and a driven action. Now, this is exactly the point in which a lot of our users make the mistake of navigating to this new page, having a page change, and continuing on the experience on this new page, when that is completely unnecessary. You can end this experience right now with no problems at all and build a new experience starting on automated messages, because as we mentioned, it really is best practice to have experiences be built per view. So this experience is actually done. That's it. Super, super easy to do. So I'm going to actually just really quickly jump into automated messages and build the next couple of steps in this onboarding flow. So I'm going to come to automated messages, and instead of adding a step, having the page change, all of that, like I just said, I'm actually going to head over here, click create a new experience. And now I'm building a whole new experience per view on this page. I've navigated to the page that I want to be on. I'm going to click create, select my theme, select theme. I have a question really quick and that I would like to address. Jonathan, are users forced to answer the radio buttons before you can click? You get to decide that. That is an option. Let me just really quickly show you that really fast. Okay, so if I've included a radio button, for example, same thing with text input. If you click the little wheel, it's the settings. Is it required? Yes or no? If you say it's required, then they have to answer. And so before they're able to click to move on, they'll have to answer the radio button. However, if you don't click required, they can move on without answering, just so you know. All right, so we're gonna delete this because that's not what I wanted to build. All right, so I'm ready to remove the modal. Now, if you imagine that my user has gone through the modal, they've gone through the driven action, now they've landed on this page. Now I want a new experience to launch for them. I'm gonna add a step, and I want a driven action here because what I want them to do is click on new message. This is the key action that I want my users to take. And because I'm building very goal-oriented experiences, why not move straight to the goal? I could set up tool tips and explain like all the different things about all messages, active messages, pause, all of that, but that's not critical for their onboarding right now. That's beneficial information to provide them later, but first let's teach them how to do something. So we'll click new message. This is another driven action click. Select my template. Now, same thing, provide information, explain the value. I want that backdrop to really draw my user's eye to it, and I'm going to remove my user's option to exit out. All right, the box width is just depending on how much text you want to provide, and also just to make sure that it fits in nicely with your own UIUX. All right, so this is all set. Now they're going to see this action, and they're going to have to click on new messages. So let's open up that view because the Userpilot element detection algorithm will only launch experiences when an element can be detected. And because this is a hidden view, nothing will launch until they actually click on it. So they'll click on this, and now this view has popped up. And now I can continue building. I'm going to add a step. I'm going to use another driven action because we have text fields available. And what's great is that we have driven action text inputs available too, which means they can only move forward once they actually start inputting text. So this is opportunity to explain what they need to do. They'll type in and then they'll click next, and it'll bring them into the rest of the message type. So we'll save this. Now, if I want the same properties that I set on group settings for the previous driven action to apply to this one, which means that remove the X button, highlight the field, all of that, I have a little bit of a trick so that you don't have to input this data every time. And that is, you can actually take patterns, so driven action, tooltip, and you can drag them into the same group together. So let's click here and drag her straight in. And now any of the steps will have the same settings applied to them, right? And you also then have a progress bar that will appear for them. So you can see that progress bar at the top. And there you go. Now, the last thing I want to do is add one more step. And actually what I want is a driven action hotspot. A driven action hotspot is a really great way to draw attention to something that they need to click on or accomplish without being too pushy. Perhaps it takes them a little while to get through this modal because they take their time writing the message. So this will just provide them the opportunity to keep working. It's a nice beacon, and then when they're ready, they know where to click and they know how to move forward. So, and as I mentioned, I don't actually have to edit anything in group settings because I can just drag it into the same group. So now I have, let's close out of it so you can see what will happen. So the user lands on this page. The first thing that they see, oh, I have to come here. They'll click on it. Then this will appear. Oh, great. Let me put in my message title. And once they've done that, this driven action hotspot will appear for them. And it's just that simple. Now this entire experience is done. I've built the welcome modal and the driven action on the home screen, the landing page. And now I've set up a completely goal-oriented, easy to accomplish driven actions series that will lead my users to do the first step that they need to accomplish to become activated users on this page. Easy as that. The last thing that I told you I wanted to show you was including contextual tips and hints for users as they navigate. Perhaps one of the other really important things for my users to accomplish when they're onboarding is installing the script. For example, it's not critical, but it is super important and it will make their navigating a lot easier. So perhaps I want to build a new experience. My computer's a little bit slow today. Sorry, everyone. Create a new experience. And I actually want to put in a hotspot. This hotspot will be right next to guides, for example, here, because this is where they can come when they're ready to install the script, if they want to. But it's not going to interrupt them as they work through this new message task, which is something that they really need to accomplish. Something to keep in mind with hotspots is that they are sensitive to wherever you drop them. So depending on where you place them, that's where they're going to be. Another thing to keep in mind that is something really exciting. We will be releasing some new features which include hotspots in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for those. It's a secret, but they will be native to your pages, which means that they will be available to your users throughout their experience, which is super cool. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and this is where my hotspot will be. Now, there are a couple things that I want to use this hotspot for. I'm going to explain to my users like, hey, come here when you're ready to install the script. And I'm going to add a button. Now, this button is going to say install script. And I'm going to link this to a URL. Let me get that URL first. Let me go grab it. All right, so I'm going to launch this experience when they need to install the script. So yes, so there's a couple ways that you can use element detection. I'll show you that right now. So I'm going to install, go to URL, and they're going to head right over to this URL. And now when they're ready, if they click on guides, oh, I can do that, why not? And they'll click on install the script, it'll lead them directly to guides, and they'll be able to install it, no problem at all. All right, so what you asked me was about element detection, and that's a really great question. I'm gonna show you manual element detection. And so right now I could have it linked to the text to include guides. And now it'll link directly to that based on this element. So does that help answer your question? Fantastic, excellent. All right, so now I have set up these 3 experiences all for this welcome flow. The modal with the driven action, the 3 different actions, and now this hotspot. Now I'm gonna head into the next portion, which I believe to be one of the most important portions, which is when you're heading into publish. When you click publish, that doesn't mean that it's ready to go. This is actually where you need to come in and really specify your audience, when you want things to trigger, etc. Keep in mind that everything that you apply to one of these, you have to apply to all of the experiences that you have built in this series, because you want this experience to launch to those users specifically. So we're gonna scroll down over here to audience. Now, this is where you are choosing the audience to match a specific condition. I'm gonna select, because I'm building this specifically for new users, I'm gonna select traits that fit that. However, while we're here, I might as well show you some of the things that you can choose from. So user identification is what we're gonna use later on, but you can build experiences that target an entire segment. So you can, if you, in your own, I'll show you this in a moment, but in your own users page, you can identify a specific segment, and you can set up so that anytime that your users fall into that segment, they get experiences. That's one thing. Responses is where they'll come, where you can set up experiences that launch based on the responses that they gave you in those radio buttons and forms from before. So obviously this isn't auto-populated right now because I don't have any live experiences that are collecting this data. But once I do, this will auto-populate and you can start launching experiences based on those responses. Properties here, so you can build experiences that will, because of course, depending on the size of the screen that your users are looking at, it moves things around your own elements and ours. And so you really want to set up experiences that fit those screens. And so you can say, I want these experiences to only launch on iPads or only launch on cell phones. And so when they are logging in on a different device, you can set up experiences specifically for them. Location, as I mentioned before, engagement in previous experiences or checklists. So perhaps you really only want to launch experiences if a user hasn't finished a checklist. And you can say, hey, we noticed you haven't finished a checklist. Would you like to accomplish the last task? Something like that. Or if they have, you can launch experiences that say, thanks so much for finishing your welcome flow. Are you ready to learn the next step in your onboarding process? Or anything like that. NPS, if you're collecting data about how your users feel about you, now you can use that information to launch experiences for them, thanking them, gathering more information as to why they gave you a low score perhaps, maybe nudging them to give you a review on another website. And the last thing is custom events. As I mentioned before, this is super helpful in order to launch experiences based on your own users and what's happening on your own pages. But let's head right back up to user identification, because this is where I want to target brand new first run users. So user identification, user ID, I'm going to change this to signed up. When did they sign up? I have them signed up less than 7 days or 15 days ago, 14 days ago. And now I can choose and or, let's say, or user ID is signed up after April 1st. So any user that is signed up after this date will see this experience, or any user that's less than 14 days old, for example. That really helps me target those users. But there are tons of ways for you to target a user, right? The dates are one of the ways, but you can also really narrow this down. And there's no limit to how tight you make this funnel. You can really specify, I want a user that is signed up less than 14 days, signed up after April 1st, and I want a user to is using an iPhone, is not mobile, for example. So only users that are on their desktop and are brand new, for example. But there are so many ways, like the limit does not exist with the ways that you can really customize. Frequency is something that you should also keep in mind when setting up experiences. The default setting for this is only once. And the problem is that if for some reason your user logs in and then doesn't finish the flow, doesn't finish the experience, there's a million reasons why a user wouldn't finish. Now it will never launch for them again because you've set it up that way. But you can keep triggering until the goal finishes the tasks that you had in mind, making sure that a user is accomplishing the goals that you have. So those are some of the things that you will want to do. Make sure that, like I said, every single filter that you apply for this will need to be set up for the other two experiences that we built today. So you would go through, you would publish this and then go through and do the same for the other two experiences. So the first thing that we can see here is users. This is where you're going to see all the users that are coming to your pages. Obviously this is my demo account, so I don't have any, but you'll be able to gather information once you've installed the JavaScript on who your unique users are, and take a look at how many times they've logged on, what country they're in, what device they're using. You'll also be able to segment them, like I mentioned before. And so here will be your segments where you've set up, I need to see my new signups. How are they doing? How often are they logging on, etc. Adoption is a really great tab for you to set up tracking on the features that you have on your pages. So every single button, for example, basically is trackable. And so you can take a look and see how many times users are making calls, or how many times users are checking the status of something. And that way, as you track the adoption of these features, you can really see how successful you are onboarding your users, or perhaps you need to make some changes and identify the problem and launch experiences for those users that are not adopting the features that you had in mind. This is where you will come to take a look not only at your experience settings, but also this is information for you. How many times was this experience triggered? Is it being engaged with? Is it being completed? Is a goal that you passed to us being accomplished? You can also take a look at analytics within an experience. So obviously there's nothing here, but you'll be able to take a look at how many users have seen it, how frequently something is being completed. If it's an experience that has multiple steps, you'll also be able to see at what stage in the experience you lost a user. Perhaps you're seeing 100% unique users have seen it. Everybody is seeing the experience. I'm going to take you back. Maybe you're seeing 100% engagement, but then you're only seeing 12% completion. You can take a look at every step along the way and see where it is that you lose all of your users. Perhaps that's something in your own language that you're not explaining something well, or maybe you haven't provided a clear next step or call to action, and you really need to help modify your experience to make that be accomplished. So it's a great way to track information. Checklists are the only thing that you currently cannot build in the builder. You have to build it here in your dashboard. And so you'll be able to click create a new checklist, and you'll build it all here. And everything is basically the same as experiences. You'll be able to see when things were triggered, engaged with, etc. And the settings for audience and all of that are all the same. One more thing here is the NPS scores. Setting up NPS truly is one of the best ways to really make sure that you have a thermometer on your users. How are they feeling? How are they engaging with your platform? You can also gather information on yourselves. Ask them, hey, how likely are you to recommend this platform to a friend, and gather that information so that you can constantly address problems, make sure that your users are excited with what you're doing. And all of that is really customizable, not only in the questions that you ask, but the answers, what happens with the answers after they have taken part. The themes is where you'll come to upload your own fonts, modify your colors, choose absolutely everything that you want to modify, from how rounded the corners are. We want this to look native to your own pages. So take some time to play around with these themes. And in settings is where you're actually going to come to hit installation and install that code. That JavaScript is really going to be the thing that helps you gather as much information as you can. Let's head over here into so this is in users. This is where you can export all of your user data if that's what you were asking about, but you can also export data on the experiences that you have. If you come into here, if I come into analytics, I can take a look at this information and export it as well. When you're setting up a checklist, let's go ahead into this one. You'll come in here and you'll click create, and the example is over here on the right-hand side. So this is what it will look like on your own page. When you're setting it up, it's basically chronological. You'll set up the look, the feel, all of that first, and then you'll set up the actual tasks. But when you're in here, in Beacon is where you get to choose where you want it to be. Do you want this at the bottom left of your page, the bottom right, or advanced? And this is where you get to choose. I typically power the bottom right-hand side. That's just personal preference, but you can completely customize how that looks. And then you'll insert all of this information. The completion is just something to congratulate users once they're done. And it's also great to have a call to action here. Say like, wow, you've done this now, and you can have them move on to maybe secondary features or things that are exciting. The next thing that you have is the tasks section. This is where you're going to come in and include information for your tasks, what you need them to do. You can choose to have it simply just be the name of the task. And if it's chronological or free, chronological, they have to go in that order, but free, they can pick and choose what they accomplish and when. Or you can also include information like a description below by having let me show you. In edit, here there's a detailed task, and here you can include the subtitles and include the call to action label and what you want them to do. You can have an experience that set like the task is do nothing. This is really great for those that very first task. It sounds really silly, but when a user logs on, sees a checklist and sees that they've already been able to check something off, perhaps it's set up a profile by registering, they've already set up a profile. So it's already ticked off. They're, a percentage of the way to completing their onboarding journey, and they're excited about it. You can have it go to a URL, and on that page, you have an experience set up that will meet them there to lead them through their onboarding on that page. You can have it trigger an experience, or you can have it trigger a custom JavaScript feature or function. So thank you all so much for joining us on the webinar today. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. My email is elise@userpilot.co. Absolutely any questions, feel free to include videos or screenshots of things that you're building, things that you're hoping to put together. I look forward to seeing what you are using out of this webinar. And also, one more quick thing, I'm excited to see what everybody is experimenting with. I'm going to pass out a quick handout. This is a complex onboarding one-on-one with one of our other customer success managers, Roy. If you have a really complex platform that has a lot of dynamic URLs or like a lot of really complex things, he is your guy. He's really great with those kinds of onboarding sessions. If you have an onboarding that is a little bit more like just getting started, not, you want to see what the big picture is and how to get really the most out of your onboarding, I'm your girl. I'm going to send a follow-up email with this, with all of my calendar information and my email. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I look forward to seeing what you all build. Thanks so much for coming. Bye.